Today we're going to have a discussion about sag and why sag is so important. Because as a suspension guy, I get all these questions, people saying, well, I checked my clickers, I did this with my clickers, that with my clickers, the bike's doing this. And I always ask them, have you set your sag? And most of the time they say no. So sag is very important because it sets the whole geometry of the bike. The bike is designed to work in certain geometry. Since we're discussing sag and geometry of the bike, there are a few things that help with the geometry. The linkage is a big part of it. I have an aftermarket linkage on here, which makes the rising rate a little bit different. It makes the bike a little bit more linear in the rear because the stock bike falls through the middle of the stroke too quick and then gets harsh, where this one holds it up a little bit better and is more linear as it goes through the stroke. Okay, also part of the geometry is the triple clamps. The offset. The offset of the triple clamp is the distance between the center of the steering stem and the center of the fork. The newer Cowie, the 2425 Cowie has a good offset. You don't really need to change the offset. These triple clamps give the bike a little more comfort. They flex a little bit more, so it gives it a little more comfort. But unlike the older generation Cowie, they had 23.5 clamps just like this, but the frame and the geometry of the bike was in such a way that if you put the 22 millimeter offset clamps, the bike turned better. Okay, another part of the geometry is the fork height. This goes along with the sag. All this stuff goes together. Offset, the clamps, the fork height, how much you move them up in the clamp, the bike's going to turn better. It's almost the same as putting the bike high in the back. Or you push them down, it makes it more stable. So it's a fine line between offset, fork height, and your sag. They all have to be in like a range, and then it's personal preference to what you like to make you comfortable. Like if the sag's off or you have the forks pushed way up or way down, it's going to make the bike handle weird. That's why you always got to stay, like this bike likes between 2.5 millimeters and 5 millimeters with 100 millimeters of sag. That's a good, at least for me, that's what I like. And most of my test riders, they have the same conclusion. But you can fine tune that a little bit to your personal preference. So if the sag is too low in the back, like say it's 115 millimeters, well, that's way too low in the back. So what that's going to do is it's going to kick the front end out, which changes the rake. And once you do that, it makes the bike more stable, but also make the back end not work right. It'll make the front end stiffer because there's less weight transfer to the front end, and it'll kick the rake out, make it more stable, but it won't want to turn. It'll feel real lazy in the corners, might want to push. And it goes the other way too. If the bike's only at 85 or 90 in the back, it's too high in the back, it's going to pull the fork in, which is going to change the rake again. It's going to make it turn like crazy, but it's going to head shake probably. It's going to be really unstable. The back's not going to track. There's lots of things involved in that. So it really is very important. And I know on some bikes, they say 95 to 105 is good. Like on my particular bike here, I love it at 100. 100 works great. Turns good. Back end works good. It's not too deep because if it gets too deep in the stroke in the back, it's going to get harsh. So it works really good at 100. Other bikes like the Yamahas, like 105, 103. And you get some bikes like the KTMs with the PDSs, like the Explorer bikes, the off-road bikes. They work better more like 108, 110 because they like the stability of that. And that's being that it doesn't have a linkage. They sit a little lower in the back because they do have more travel than a regular bike. But those are just, starting points. I would say most bikes between 100 and 105 is your sweet spot, and then it's personal preference, what you like. Some people like a bike that's a little bit higher in the back. Some people like a bike that's a little bit lower in the back, but you got to keep it in that range to make the bike handle properly. Yeah, so it's really, really important. It's the first thing you need to do before you go start playing with clickers or doing anything else is you need to set the sag. Okay, when I talk about setting the sag is the distance between the axle and a point on the bike. Now, some people say they measure it here. I've seen people measure it, whatever. I believe that the sag should be set in the angle that the wheel travels, like this. So I always go from here to like there, that point. So you get the measurement from here to here with the bike on the stand, the wheel off the ground. You sit on it with your gear on, everything on, just like you're gonna ride, and you wanna sit neutral in the bike. So you want your hips over the pegs. You're gonna be sitting way up here, or you can stand straight up and down. And if you do stand straight up and down, you can't bend over and grab the bars. You gotta hold yourself up against a wall or something, straight up and down, and measure it again, here to here. That's where you're supposed to get your 95 to 105 millimeter change. If you're only reading 90, that means the bike is too high in the back. So you need to soften the spring. You need to take some preload out of the spring. If the bike's sitting too low, like 110, you need to tighten the spring, which lifts the bike up. So like 105, 110 will be down here, 100's here, 90 will be here. So that's exactly how you set the sag. So you want to make sure from here to here is where you want it to be. And the way you adjust that is by adding preload to the spring or taking preload off the spring to let the bike sit lower or come up higher. And it's very important where you sit. You want to sit with your hips over the pegs. You don't want to bend over. You don't want to do anything like that, straight up and down, or stand straight up and down. Because once you lean over or you move back a little bit, you got to be consistent. You move back just a couple inches, change the sag. So every time you do it, you got to be consistent. Very important. Getting ready to set the sag on this bike. Okay, when setting your sag, these are the tools you need. You need a sag scale, either a regular sag scale like this, a tape measure will work, or if you're fortunate enough to have the slacker, these work great. Some bikes you need a hammer and a tool like this to loosen up the lock collar and tighten the spring, or loosen the spring and then tighten up the lock collar. Other bikes like the KTM and the Cowie, you need this to loosen the Allen so you can turn the preload adjuster. And if you're lucky enough to have an X-Trig adjuster, you just need an 8mm T-handle. That's all you need to set the sag on your bike, and someone to set this. As you're sitting on the bike, you need someone to measure it and someone to hold you up. Getting ready to set the sag on this bike. Okay, it's way off. It's only at 90. The sag was a little high, so now we're going to loosen the spring up a little bit to try and get to our 103 millimeters. They were about 98. We need a little bit more. That should get us where we want to be. Mike, can you hold him up again? Sorry. 103 millimeters, perfect.